This is the Less Doing Podcast with your host, Ari Meisel. Learn how to optimize, automate, and outsource and be more effective at everything.
You're listening to the Less Doing Podcast. This is Ari Meisel. Today I'm going to be interviewing Seamus Mullen, who is a chef in New York City, but he's gone on an amazing journey overcoming a chronic illness, and he is on his way to a pretty amazing racing event. We talk about his blog, his struggle with rheumatoid arthritis, and the road to La Ruta Los Conquistadores. So you're definitely going to find this interview interesting. We also mentioned earthing sheets in there, which is a recovery method that I recommend sometimes, and you'll hear more about that too. There's two big announcements that I want to make. The first one is that I'll be starting my webinars again, and I'll be doing those on a monthly basis. The next one is going to be October 23rd, and you can sign up for it at the link in the show notes. It'll be, I think, 11 a.m. and Eastern Time on October 23rd. And in that particular webinar, I'm going to delve deeper into the concept of creating the external brain. So how to get things out of your head, have a clear mind, do the things that you want to do. It'll be interactive. It'll be really interesting. And I urge you to sign up for it. If you can't make that one, get on the list anyway, because I will be doing these webinars monthly. But the big announcement is that I'm going to be holding my very first Less Doing retreat. This is going to be a once-in-a-lifetime event, although I do hope to do it more than once, but this is going to be a very unique opportunity to spend an entire day with me and no more than 8 other really productive and interesting individuals with interesting challenges that we can all overcome together. The retreat's going to be held at a Balinese home in New Paltz, which is in upstate New York. So sorry for people listening from around the world. This is sort of a local-ish thing, but maybe you want to fly in for it because you're going to get so much value out of it. So the sign-up application form is in the show notes. Make sure if you have any opportunity to get there, and it's going to be December 14th, that you check it out, because I promise you there won't be anything, you won't ever have experienced anything like this. And with that, let's get to the interview with Seamus. Welcome to the Less Doing Podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Seamus Mullen, who is the executive chef at Trattoria in New York City. He's been a finalist for the next Iron Chef, and he's also an extreme athlete, both on and off road bikes. So, Seamus, thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So I want to start off, and I know this is probably the most detailed thing you can give us, but I do want to start by talking about your food journey, and sort of how you became a chef and what food has meant to you and how you kind of grew up with it and what this meant to you.
Wow, I mean, how much time do we have? Because I've been around, we've all been around food all of our lives, but I think that a lot of us have not really thought about food all of our lives. And I've been really fortunate to have had an intimate relationship with food for the majority of my life. I would say I kind of strayed a bit in my teenage years when I was in high school, and I didn't eat so well. I went away to boarding school, and the food is, institutional food in a boarding school is not exactly the best thing to eat when you're going through your developmental phase and your hormones are changing. But other than that part of my life, I've had a really, really strong relationship with food. I grew up on a small farm in Vermont. My grandmother on my mother's side went to the Cordon Bleu in Paris in the 1930s, and my grandfather on my father's side was the senior editor of Sunset magazine in California for 45 years, and they were very involved in the California food movement of the 60s, 70s, 80s. So I was kind of around both really, really good homegrown ingredients that my folks raised on the farm, from vegetables to meat, to homemade cheese and homemade yogurt and all of that jazz, to kind of more refined, large-scale cuisine via both of my grandmothers. And I started cooking at a really young age. So I started cooking. The first things I remember cooking were probably when I was 5 or 6, cooking with my grandmothers. And I always kind of knew that food would always be really important in my life. That kind of set the things in motion. And then obviously I went to high school and I ended up going to Spain my senior year in high school as an exchange program, and that began a really, really long, intimate love affair with Spanish food and Spanish culture, and kind of set the wheels in motion for what became, what evolved into being my career, which is a chef, a professional chef. I cook predominantly Spanish food, my own kind of brand of Spanish food, if you will. But I have always, I've always loved food and been very passionate about food. And it's been really in the past few years that my relationship with food has kind of changed significantly, and that now I really, I have a much more personal, deep, intimate relationship with food than I ever had before, and that I've been able to really see a huge correlation between the food I eat and how I feel. And I think a lot of that is something that we all go through. I think we've been going through it more and more recently because of changes in modern food over the past 30 years, but also because a lot of us are in our 30s, or even older, are seeing that while in our 20s we could do whatever we want, eat whatever we want, and still function at a pretty high level. You can't really do that. Most of us can't really do that as your body starts to change and age. If you continue to abuse it or not feed it well, you're going to be performing at subpar levels, which is something that I'm just, I'm unwilling to do at this point in my life.
So obviously, first of all, you've obviously experienced food in different ways, from your culinary training, but now to your, not now, I'm sorry, but then you have a book called Hero Food, and you focus on foods that make us healthier, right? And because nutrition really is sort of the backbone to that, and a lot of people don't really break down the elements of those things. So why don't you talk a little bit about some of those hero foods?
Sure. And the genesis for the book was really came out of my own personal experience dealing with illness. Starting back in 2001, I started feeling really crummy, and I wasn't exactly sure why. And then in a kind of a confusing way to make things even more difficult to understand why I was feeling crummy, I then got into a really bad motorcycle accident, which made me feel even crummier, but then made it hard for me to understand why I felt so awful. And eventually, in 2007, I started having really severe flare-ups, and was eventually diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And that's when I really started to see a huge correlation between how I treated my body vis-a-vis what I put into it, and how my body responded and how I felt. And I learned pretty quickly that that there was a direct correlation between what I ate and how I felt. And I tried to consume as much information as I could about food and wellness and the impact of nutrition on our health and all of this. And I found that there were a lot of books, cookbooks in particular, that were written by people that may have had very good intentions and known a lot about nutrition and known a lot about science and medicine, or maybe they didn't, who knows. But they didn't seem to know very much about food and about making food taste really good. And, the old kind of classic story is that you go to the health food store and the guy at the checkout counter is the most unhealthy looking person you've ever seen, with pallid skin and just doesn't look very fit and healthy. And I felt as though health food, or food for wellness, if you will, had been really was really suffering from the stigma of being undelicious food, of being food you didn't really want to eat, but you ate because you felt obligated to eat your greens, for instance. And growing, my experience growing up around really wonderful ingredients, was that was not the case, that food really, good food, healthy food should be delicious food. And so I wanted to kind of tell that story from the perspective of somebody who really cares about food tasting good, to help people understand that to eat well doesn't mean you have to forego flavorful food. That you can eat really well, and you can eat really, you can eat for wellness. You can eat to help yourself deal with things like inflammation, and do it in a way that's really, really delicious. And I think a lot of it at the time, particularly when I was first diagnosed with RA, I had everybody coming to me. And one of the things about, and you know this already having gone through Crohn's, is that you get so much unsolicited advice. Everybody wants to tell you exactly what you need to do and how it's going to heal you. And, you know, at a certain point you're like, listen, you don't experience what I experience. You don't know what I'm going through every day. So don't tell me not to eat this and not to eat that and not to eat this. And I got really sick of seeing all of this sort of elimination stuff. And I felt like it really was the wrong approach to food. If food is about fueling your body for wellness, then why are you talking about taking all these things out of your diet? Shouldn't we be talking about integrating more things that are really good for you into your diet? Shouldn't we be celebrating food rather than, you know, punishing ourselves? And certainly there are a lot of foods that I don't eat, although those foods I wouldn't even go so far as to call them foods. So I wouldn't say things that I consider real food, I eat. Things that are not real food for the most part, I don't eat. But my way of eating, or my lifestyle of food, which is not a diet, and I hate the word diet, particularly as a verb. It really is about integrating things that are good for me, that make me feel good, into my into the way I eat. So that's the very verbose response to what the book is all about. The book is broken down into 18 chapters, and each chapter is an ingredient, and they're ingredients to things like good meat, and good birds, and good fish, and almonds, and anchovies, and leafy greens. And the idea is that to take an individual ingredient and really explore different and unusual and exciting ways to cook with them that are delicious, that are really about celebrating that ingredient and getting more of those things into your body, because they are so, you know, the foundation of wellness is what you put into your body. And I'm blown away, and we could talk about this for hours, but I'm blown away at the wisdom of all these old adages, like you are what you eat, and you got to eat a pound of dirt before you die. You know, I'm sure you're familiar with the whole idea of dropping the baby's pacifier on the ground, and do you wipe it off or do you sanitize it? You know,
right. I usually just put it in my mouth and then put it back in theirs.
Exactly. You know, or, you know, one of the things that blows me away is you look at traditional cultures around the world, and they've almost all consumed fermented foods on some level, because in our kind of collective unconscious, we've known that we need to feed our gut with bacteria to be able to have a strong and healthy immune system. So we've known
right.
that.
I want to actually stop you before you get too far, because you covered some really, really good points. No, because you covered some, like 4 or 5 really important points that I want to address. So the first one is, for everyone listening, those who don't know, rheumatoid arthritis is a autoimmune disease, and it causes chronic inflammation. Very similar in a lot of ways to the way Crohn's is a autoimmune disease that causes chronic inflammation. Very similar in the way that many illnesses are autoimmune and cause chronic inflammation. So that inflammation results in pain, it results in malnutrition, it results in so many issues. And stress is a factor in everybody's inflammation to some extent. So stressing about food is probably one of the worst things that anybody can do for their health. And unfortunately, we live in a culture that really pushes us to stress about food, whether it's dieting or not eating this, and you know, the point that you made about eliminating things is really a good one, because when, for instance, with Crohn's or with a lot of digestive issues, when you have a flare-up, the doctors will tell you to go on the BRAT diet, which is the bread, rice, applesauce, and toast diet, which is no nutrition and all sugar. So it's
like the worst thing you could do for inflammation.
Exactly. It's the worst possible thing you can do. And while I'm not going against doctors on this, but while a doctor is very comfortable giving you an anti-inflammatory drug that may work but will undoubtedly have all sorts of side effects, they're not comfortable telling you to eat parsley, which is anti-inflammatory.
Right.
They're not comfortable telling you to eat butter, which is anti-inflammatory. So your relationship with food from the taste side is obviously really important, but in a way, I feel like people who have a really good knowledge of nutrition are doctors in a way. It's almost like you are a medicine man because you know the effects that these things have on your body. It's your version of giving someone a prescription. So, that addresses those couple things. But the thing about the dirt, I really want to talk about. So, a lot of the illnesses that we see and the illnesses that you and I have individually experienced are not present in unindustrialized nations. You don't
Not at all.
No, not at all. You don't hear about people in West Africa complaining about digestive issues or swollen joints. You don't hear
or asthma or
right.
autism or all these other things either. Yeah.
Right. And a lot of this stuff goes back to gut permeability, which everybody should be intimately familiar. Well, I mean, hopefully not intimately familiar with, but you should know about this too. Gut permeability is when you're eating stuff that is not good for you, and food particles are getting into your blood. And obviously, your body doesn't like food particles in your blood, and it starts to attack, and that becomes an issue. So for us to have a solid gut, we need to have a relationship with the bacteria in our world. So go ahead. You were talking about a peck of dirt, and I know that you're a big fan of fermented food. So go on, continue on that for a moment.
So I want to. I mean, one thing you touched on, like three really cool things there that I think about all the time, and to gut permeability is something that, and we'll get to this more if we talk about my medical history, because I discovered that a lot of these problems were stemming. Everything that I was dealing with was stemming from leaky gut syndrome caused by, in all likelihood, by parasites and a bacterial infection in my gut over a long period of time. So I went through, I mean, today, for instance, if you ask me how I'm doing today, my response would be, I feel great. And, you know, I did an intense 2-hour workout this morning on my bike. I worked a long day yesterday, and I feel great. And I did not feel great for probably 10 years. So I feel better now than I've felt in 10 years. And that feeling of feeling great, which I think every human being should experience and hopefully should experience chronic greatness, because I dealt with chronic crappiness for years and years and years. And I know how awful it is and how difficult it is just to face even getting out of bed when you're in chronic pain all the time. That was directly linked to gut health. And you know, as you said, we need to have a good relationship. We need to be aware of the relationship we have with these little critters that live in our bodies. And these little critters that live in our bodies that are responsible for our immune strength or our immune weakness, depending upon what critters we actually have. And this is, you know, where kind of I think the study of the microbiota is really the forefront of modern medicine. And we don't seem to really, from what I understand, we don't really know exactly what's going on. The best we can do is kind of take a bit of a shotgun approach to it. But we do know that eating things like foods that are high in natural fiber are very good for promoting the growth of good bacteria in your gut. And we do know that eating a lot of refined sugar and eating a lot of grains, for instance, for the most part, are not good at promoting the right kind of bacteria in your gut. So in my case, yes, I think that, I probably fell victim, I think my gut started getting screwed up when I was in high school, honestly. I got salmonella in high school and got really sick. And from that point on, I had some serious gut issues. And, all through my 20s, I was a very competitive cyclist, and I was a really, really fit athlete. And I think my body was strong enough to compete at a very high level and to be at a high level of performance, despite of the fact that it was slowly breaking down. But when I got to my 30s, and then having a motorcycle accident on top of it and getting sick, I think my body couldn't take it anymore. It's amazing. The more I learn about this, the more I see a lot of other guys my age in their mid-30s to late 30s who suddenly like their health is breaking down, and I really think that a lot of it, whether it's developing psoriasis or I know so many people that have Crohn's or have IBS or have other, yet to be named autoimmune diseases or autoimmune responses that have doctors baffled. I think a lot of this is really directly related to our gut and to the relationship we have with our gut, and that all stems from the foods that we eat.
So let's talk about what you look like now, or what your sort of life looks like now. So you went through this horrible experience, and you're obviously doing a lot better now. And I know that that's involved food and a lot of quantified self stuff, and even tracking all sorts of things. What does your diet look like now?
So my diet now is, a big change for me. And again, I think one of the things that's really important is that, I love the term quantified self, but part of quantified self means there's two things, there's two words in that, and they're both really important words. Quantified, so making sure that you're measuring, and two, self, making sure that you're present and involved in this. And for a really long time, I don't think that I was present and involved in my own well-being. I suffered from what a lot of us suffer from, which is, okay, we go to the doctor tells us what's wrong with us, they give us a medication, and then we go about our lives just following a whole bunch of like some good and some bad behavior, but with the knowledge that, I'm taking this medication, I'm being treated by my doctor, and so therefore I'm going to get better. And until you can actually take responsibility and say, no, I am going to be responsible for my own well-being, you're never going to get better, because it doesn't matter how incredibly powerful the drug is that your doctor gives you. There is no silver bullet for wellness. Wellness comes from hard work, and I think that that's something that, like, in your podcast with Ben Greenfield, you were talking about Shawshanking, which I think is a great term. Like, you have to put in the work, and it's not easy. And it's okay that it's not easy. Like, it's okay not to feel okay. It's okay to feel a little bit of discomfort and to push yourself, because the recovery from that will be very, very positive. You'll come out the other side a stronger person. So some of the things that I do, so this is what works for me. And again, like, this is very much, it's an ongoing process and experimentation. And it's also very new for me, because my newfound wellness and strength, which I haven't had in a really long time, has only been in the past 6 months. 6 months ago, my bloods were terrible. I had a lot of inflammation. They weren't terrible. They were getting better. A year ago, my bloods were terrible. My triglycerides were really high. My white blood cell count was really high. All of my rheumatoid factor was positive. My sedimentation rate was really high. All of my C-reactive protein, which is one of the markers for rheumatoid arthritis, was very, very high. All of my bloods looked really bad. And a year ago, I was about a step away from being type 2 diabetic. I weighed 30 pounds more than I weigh now, and I felt like absolute garbage every day. And I still got up, went to work, did everything that I had to do to be a successful entrepreneur in New York City. And it wasn't until I was able to, two things. One thing, which you were very helpful for me in this, in that you inspired me to take responsibility for my own well-being. And then two, meeting a really remarkable doctor, Dr. Frank Lippman, who really helped me understand how important my gut was in getting me better. So all of those things, and I know that I've kind of rambled and not really answered your question yet, but if you want to talk about all of those things were really crucial in getting me to a position to be able to now start to develop a really good toolkit that helps me feel good, feel better every day. And I do feel like I'm making a step, a positive step every day. But specifically to tell you about some of the things I do, obviously I track, as you mentioned, I track a lot of things. I track my sleep. And a lot of this has come on my own, and also from, you and I have a working relationship, which is great, and has been very helpful for me, and I've seen real serious benefits, not only coaching benefits because you coach me, but also just from looking at how I'm progressing and altering some of my own behavioral choices. I was really skeptical of birthing but I got to say, the earthing sheet's pretty amazing. Even my wife was really skeptical. She sleeps really well, much better than either of us.
Well, wait, let's stop and tell what it is.
What's that?
Talk about what earthing is. Tell everyone about what it is, what earthing is.
Sure. I mean, earthing is kind of, again, like this goes back to this all of this great old wisdom that the intuitive wisdom of our grandmothers or of our ancestors. I mean, earthing, if you think about when you walk barefoot in the grass, you kind of like, it puts a smile on your face. And I always tell people when I look at the color green, or if you're meditating, meditate on the color green for a moment, because there's something so positive and inherently good about the color green. Walking in the grass is the same way. There's something just that feels so good about walking in the grass. And it's not just an emotional response. I mean, there's a physiological reaction that your body is going through that makes you feel better. And having that, and you can explain this much better than I can, but having that electrogravitational relationship with Earth affects your body and affects how you feel, and obviously helps recover and helps you rest, which is such an important part of being a healthy human being, is giving your body a chance to, and your cells a chance to recover. So does that? So
yeah, just to let
a layman's explanation.
Yeah, right. So earthing, there's two ways to look at it, and they're both valid. There's the crunchy way and then there's the scientific way. And the crunchy way is really that we've lost our connection with Mother Earth because we wear rubber-sole shoes and we live in buildings and we sleep on beds that are not on the ground and all this stuff. And that has thrown us out of some sort of symbiosis. The scientific version is that we are all electrically charged in some way. Every one of us, everything we touch has some negative or positive ionization to it. And that can build up in some ways, and we can lose sort of that electron flow. So earthing sheets, all they really do is sort of connect you back to the earth. You plug it in, and it grounds, and you lie on it at night. And they have versions where you can have a wristband or you can stand on a mat while you're at work. But essentially, it lets you reconnect with the earth magnetically, electrically, and it really does aid recovery because it reestablishes balance.
It's remarkable. I mean, it's one of those things that when we got the sheet, they came, and the sheet is really simple. It's just a fitted sheet that has copper filaments in it. You put it on your bed underneath your regular fitted sheet, and then it has a single plug that goes into the ground plug of your wall. So there's no electrical current. This is not about electricity, which is the other part that's kind of a hard thing to get over. There's no actual electrical current. It's just you are grounded in a way that you would be if you're standing outside on the ground, barefoot. And we got the sheets, and I didn't put them on the bed for a couple of days because I was kind of skeptical, and I was also like, is this really going to really work? And I really want to deal with learning one more thing. But I figured because I'd spent the money on it, I had to do it. So I put it on the bed, and I didn't even tell my wife that I set the sheet up. And then we went to sleep, and the next morning I woke up, and I've had trouble sleeping for a really long time, which is definitely not uncommon with people that have gut issues, to have night sweats or restless sleep or grind your teeth. But just some of the physiological changes in me over the past few months, I don't have night sweats anymore. I no longer grind my teeth, which is huge. And I sleep through the night. Well, I wake up once a night to pee because I drink so much water, but I immediately go right back to sleep. And she woke up the next morning. She's like, "Oh my God, I slept so well last night." And then I told her that I'd put the sheet on, and she was and then she didn't believe me until, the next 3 successive nights she slept really well. I've had them now for probably over a month, and I sleep better now than I've slept in longer than I can remember. And I also don't sleep nearly as much. I only sleep, maybe 5.5, 6 hours.
Yeah, so that's really cool, and I'd like to point out, so in full disclosure, as Seamus said, we're working together to not only improve his health, but to take his training to kind of the next level. But I really wanted to have Seamus on here because he has such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the way nutrition affects your body. But what I also just want to point out here is that we have together put a very big focus for Seamus on recovery. Because I, as someone who's gone through not only the illness but also training for Ironman, I've learned how recovery is not could be considered, but is more important than your training because it's where you really get your gains and stuff. So the other thing is just one of the many examples of ways that you can biohack your recovery and get better sleep and better muscle regrowth and all sorts of stuff. So that's really cool. But you still haven't told us about diet.
All right, so diet. So when it comes to diet, for me, and again, like this is an ongoing process because I'm losing some excess body fat now, and I still have more body fat to lose. And it's a slow process for me. I haven't been tested for this, but I think I'm probably carb sensitive. I think I'm definitely one of those people that if I eat a lot of carbohydrates, I definitely put on fat, body fat. Some people, obviously, their metabolism is such that they can handle it much more than others. But for me, it's something that I struggle with. So I've pretty much cut carbs out of my diet. Mostly in the past 3 months. Prior to that, I ate very limited carbs. I was eating some non-gluten things like oats and quinoa, some things that had some limited gluten like farro or spelt. Now I've cut all of those out, the grains all the way out. I've cut corn out as well. And I focus on, largely on a high-fat diet. So I eat a lot of avocado. I eat avocado every day. I eat a lot of fish. I eat a lot of anchovies, sardines. I eat a lot of vegetables, and then I mix in grass-fed meat, pastured poultry, pastured pork, and I basically don't eat sugar. That's been a really big thing for me, is cutting sugar out of my diet, and it's been really remarkable because sugar and carbs. Like I used to be one of those guys that just could house a bag of potato chips, and I used to, every time I went to the grocery store, I had to like really, really resist buying a bag of potato chips because I love sea salt and vinegar potato chips, and I would see it and it would tempt me, and it'd be like it'd be like the cat trying to play with a mouse or whatever, and I would try not to, and then eventually I'd give it and I'd grab it. And now it's amazing that when you start to identify how food makes you feel, you start to look at foods that make you feel bad, and I won't even call them food stuff or food things, or food-like things that make you feel bad, and you stop thinking of them as food. So now when I'm in the grocery store and I see a bag of potato chips, I'm just like, oh yeah, imagine how shitty I'd feel if I ate that right now, or imagine how many steps backwards in my progress I would make if I ate that right now. And that's where, like, for me, it is very much about my wellness is a journey, and it's a journey that is hopefully all about, or primarily about, positive steps forward. But at the same time, I will not, and I never will forget what it was like to feel terrible. And that's where my journey really started, was from a position of feeling terrible. And if I'm taking steps backwards towards that, then then no indulgence of, no immediate pleasure of housing a bag of potato chips is worth the backwards kind of step towards feeling crappy again. So my diet has a lot of high fat.
Yeah. Okay. So and I love high fat, and I think that high fat has been very anti-inflammatory in my condition as well as other people that I've worked with. I want to point out something very important to everybody that Seamus said, and I actually didn't say. He didn't say I can't eat the bag of chips. He didn't say I can't eat these things. It's a difference between can't and don't, because if you can't, that's a diet, that's a restriction, that's an elimination, that's a stressor as far as I'm concerned. But if you can look at something that may be food and say, I don't eat that because it'll make me feel bad, or because I don't consider that food, that's you being in control, and that's you having the power. So I really like the way you phrase that.
It's the opposite of a stressor too, because instead of you're making the choice, it's liberating to know that, it would stress me out if I ate that and then I felt guilty about eating it and then I felt like crap for eating it. That would stress me out. But the liberating feeling of the choice not to eat it is like the antithesis of stress. It's the release of stress. It's like, I feel good about it. It's funny. I when I was walking to work this morning, I saw a girl pop out of the local juice bar, on her phone, lighting a cigarette with a 24-ounce glass of green juice. And I looked at that and I was like, that's the exact that's Western medicine. That's this notion of I can go and do one thing and it'll take care of my wellness, and I can continue to do all these other things that are destructive to my body. And that's part of the, I love the name of your company, Less Doing, because that's the exact opposite. That's Less Doing is about focusing and having, and being very aware of your moment. And when you're drinking a green juice and smoking a cigarette and jaywalking on the phone at the same time, you're not aware of your moment. You're not actually taking care of your body.
Right, exactly. So let's shift gears for a second here and let's talk about training. Okay, so you are training for one hell of an event. Seamus is training for La Ruta Los Conquistadores, which is the mountain bike race to end all mountain bike races. So tell us a little bit about what the race is and what you're doing to prepare.
Okay, so first of all, why on earth would I choose to do something like this? I think for me, as I said before, I race mountain bikes and road bikes and cyclocross bikes and track bikes all through my late teens and almost until I was 30, so I was 29. And I derived more joy from being on a bicycle than probably any other physical endeavor, except maybe sex, but it's very close, a close second. And if a year ago you asked me if I would about mountain biking, I would have told you, oh, that's great. I used to be a mountain biker. I love mountain biking. I had a semi-pro license. I was sponsored. I was really fast. Blah blah blah. But I'll never ride a mountain bike again. And if you were to say, well, do you think you'd ever compete on a mountain bike again? I would have laughed you out of Dodge. There's no way I thought I could possibly ever A, ride a mountain bike again, and B, actually be competitive on a mountain bike again. And then, I went through this incredible year. This has been just a remarkable year for me. And personally, I've grown so much and reclaimed so much of my health. As I started to get better, I realized, you know what? I want to try mountain biking again. And so I went and dusted off my old mountain bike and went for a ride. And for those of you who haven't mountain biked before, it's like being a kid. It's like setting up a dirt jump in the back of your house when you're 9 years old and coming down the hill on your Huffy, doing a huge jump and knocking your front teeth out, which is how I spent my entire childhood. And mountain biking just channels that energy of just absolute pure joy and adrenaline. And at the same time, because you have to be so hyper-focused on what you do, any, root or rock is going to knock you off the bike, and you're going to knock the teeth out, you're going to hurt yourself, screw yourself up. You need to be absolutely in the moment. So nothing else exists with your mountain biking, and that's what I love about it. Your ultimate focus. It's very different from running on a treadmill or going jogging or even road biking, where your mind can be elsewhere. When you're mountain biking, you're exactly in that moment you're in for the entire time you're working out. And so as I kind of rediscovered that feeling, getting on my old mountain bike and riding, and just experiencing I could actually ride on the bike again, which is something that after having 2 spinal surgeries, 3 knee surgeries, 1 ankle surgery, multiple hospitalizations, nearly dying 4 times in the past 10 years, I thought I would never be able to do this again. And just the empowerment of being able to do something that you used to love and finding you can still do it was just amazing. So I said, you know what? I got to set myself a goal, a fitness goal that is going to force me to be the strongest person I can possibly be. And so that's when I kind of thought about what's the most difficult thing I could do. And I remembered this race. It started about 20 years ago, I think, maybe a little bit less. And I was in Costa Rica, actually, right around the time when this race was started, mountain biking. And I rode a part of the course. And it was just some of the most technical, fun, crazy, hellacious climbing I've ever done. And I said, I'm going to do this race. So the race is a 3-day stage race. It starts on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica, and it ends on the Atlantic coast. It crosses the entire country. It has 29,000 feet of vertical climbing, which is, taller than the height of Mount Everest. And it covers, I think, 160 miles, but it's all off-road. So
Right.
you can imagine how incredibly challenging it is. It's a very, very tough race. And obviously to do that, I knew that I was going to need some extra help. And that's where you came into the picture, and you had some great ideas and some punishing ideas, and that's where we are now. I'm, a year away from the race, so we've got a lot of time, but at the same time, we've got a lot of work to do. And while I feel like I've made tremendous progress, and I'm very, very, very happy with the progress I've made so far, we have a long ways to go.
Cool. So I think that this really is a great picture of someone who has dealt with a really horrible, it's actually several very horrible incidents, and has not only overcome it in a big way, but really drilled the hell out of it, dissected it, and figured out how to make sure that this doesn't happen to them again. So we're basically out of time now. So Seamus, thank you so much for all of that information. Where should people go to find out all about you? Your website, your blog, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the best place to find out everything?
You can find out, about my my professional life and about the restaurants at SeamusMullen.com. And if you want to follow my personal journey, which Ari is intimately involved in, you can go to chefontwowheels.tumblr.com, and there I am. I'm charting my personal journey, including my big accomplishment the other day of a 36-inch box jump, which up from a 12-inch box jump just 3 months ago. So you can see my progress and see how the training regimens that Aria is putting me through, which I never know what's coming one day to the next. You can see my progress there, and you can learn more about the race and more about what's involved in getting me to the race.
Well, yeah, we always have to keep those workouts interesting so that your body is getting. So the last question that I always ask everyone on the podcast is my favorite question. But what are the top 3 things, your top 3 personal productivity tips that make you more effective every day? What are those 3 things?
I think the first and probably the most important productivity tip that I've learned, particularly in the last year, is being really conscious of my evening time and making sure that, one, I'm not eating too late so that when I'm sleeping, I'm really resting and recovering and I'm not digesting. 2, getting to bed at an earlier hour so that I'm actually able to wake up early. I think one of the things that I'm sure that you know this, and most people kind of inherently know this, but most really productive people wake up early. And for me, dealing with a disease of chronic inflammation for a really long time, waking up early was really, really hard. So I've become a morning person. I don't think anyone is inherently a morning person or not a morning person, but teaching yourself to become a morning person is a huge help for productivity. And then just prioritizing my workload and trying to create specific tasks for specific times, so that when I'm when I'm working on one, if I'm writing recipes, that's all I'm doing, and my phone is not anywhere near where it can be answered. I'm not connected to the internet. I'm just writing a recipe. And if I am writing an article, I'm just writing an article, and that's it. So I have kind of scheduled times for different activities. This is something that I'm working on more and more. But the more I have been able to do this, the greater my productivity has gotten. I've become much better at just actually, rather than multitasking, which ends up being kind of very non-productive, and I feel like I'm doing like 20% of everything, trying to be a bit more focused and laser focused on a single task, one at a time, and checking the box off and then moving on to the next. It's really, really been helpful.
Great. Well, I think those are 3 really awesome examples of ways that everybody could be more productive, honestly. So thank you so much, Seamus. Obviously, I look forward to continue working with you and issuing your workout for tomorrow.
All right. We'll see what you have up your space. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Less Doing podcast with Ari Meisel. For more ways to make everything in your life easier, head over to lessdoing.com and also on Twitter at twitter.com/Ari Meisel or Facebook at facebook.com/lessdoing. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to head over to iTunes and leave a positive review. It's greatly appreciated. You can learn the art of less doing, getting started with biohacking, and how to make Gmail, IFTTT, and virtual assistants your ultimate productivity toolbox at udemy.com/lessdoing. Until next time, keep optimizing, automating, and outsourcing everything you do.